Samuel Harrison pressed his dying daughter against his chest and whispered the only prayer he had left. "Please, not her too." Behind him, 4 children huddled together, watching their father break. Tommy held Hannah's hand. Rebecca clutched Benjamin's shirt. None of them had eaten in 2 days. The fire was dying, the blizzard was screaming, and baby Grace hadn't cried in hours. That silence terrified him more than anything. If you want to know how this father survived the impossible, stay with me until the very end. Hit subscribe and comment what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. Samuel Harrison had buried his wife 19 days ago. Tonight, he was certain he would bury his daughter too. The cabin felt smaller than it ever had. The walls pressed in. The fire sputtered and spat, eating through the last of the wood he'd managed to drag inside before the blizzard sealed them in. 4 days now. 4 days of wind that howled like something wounded and vengeful. 4 days of watching his children grow thinner, quieter, more afraid. And 4 days of watching baby Grace fade. She lay in his arms now, wrapped in every clean cloth he could find. 3 weeks old. 3 weeks since Eleanor had smiled at her, kissed her forehead, and whispered that she was perfect. 3 weeks since his wife had closed her eyes and never opened them again. Grace wasn't crying anymore. That was the part that made Samuel's hands shake. Babies cried. It was what they did. They wailed and fussed and demanded and screamed until you gave them what they needed. But Grace had stopped crying 6 hours ago. Now she just made these small sounds, weak little mewls that barely broke the silence. She was giving up. "Pa?" Samuel turned his head. Tommy stood in the doorway to the back room, his 9-year-old face too serious, too old. Behind him, Samuel could see the other children piled together on the bed, sharing warmth. Hannah's blonde hair spilled across the pillow. Rebecca's small arm was wrapped around Benjamin's chest. They were asleep, or pretending to be. "Go back to bed, son." "Is Grace gonna die?" The question hit Samuel like a physical blow. He wanted to lie. Wanted to say something comforting, something that would put the light back in his boy's eyes. But Tommy had watched his mother die, had stood at the grave while Samuel shoveled frozen dirt over the wooden box, had taken over feeding and dressing his younger siblings because Samuel could barely function. Tommy deserved the truth. "I don't know," Samuel said. His voice cracked. "I'm trying, Tommy. I'm trying everything I can think of." "What about the sugar water? Ma used to—" "She won't take it anymore. She's too weak." Tommy's jaw tightened. That stubborn set of his chin was pure Eleanor. "Then we gotta do something else." "We can't just let her die, Pa. We can't." "You think I don't know that?" The words came out harsher than Samuel intended. He watched Tommy flinch, watched the boy's eyes drop to the floor, and hated himself for it. This child had done nothing but try to help, had stepped up in ways no 9-year-old should ever have to. And here Samuel was, snapping at him because he couldn't handle his own failure. "I'm sorry," Samuel said quietly. "I didn't mean—" "It's okay, Pa." Tommy's voice was steady, but his hands were shaking. "I know you're tired." "We're all tired." "Yeah." Tommy looked at his baby sister, at her still, pale face. "Hannah keeps asking when Ma's coming back. I don't know what to tell her anymore." Samuel closed his eyes. Hannah was 7, old enough to understand death, young enough to keep hoping it wasn't real. She'd been asking that question for 19 days, and every time, Samuel felt another piece of his heart crack. Tell her the truth. Ma's in heaven. She's watching over us. "But is she, Pa? Is she really?" Tommy's voice dropped to a whisper. "Because if Ma was watching, Wouldn't she send help? Wouldn't she do something? Samuel had no answer for that. The fire crackled, the wind screamed, and somewhere in the endless white outside, the blizzard kept burying them deeper. "Go back to bed," Samuel said again. "Keep your siblings warm. That's the most important thing you can do right now." "What about you?" "I'll sit with Grace. Try to get her to take a little more water." Tommy nodded slowly. He started to turn away, then stopped. "Pa?" "Yeah?" "I love you." The words were simple, the kind of thing children said every day without thinking. But in that moment, with death pressing in from all sides, they hit Samuel harder than anything had since Eleanor's last breath. "I love you too, son. More than anything." Tommy disappeared into the back room. Samuel heard the soft sounds of him climbing into bed with his siblings, the rustle of blankets being rearranged, Hannah's sleepy murmur asking if everything was okay. Then silence. Samuel looked down at Grace. Her eyes were closed. Her breathing was shallow, barely visible. She looked so much like Eleanor. The same delicate features, the same way her nose crinkled when she was uncomfortable. Eleanor had laughed about that, had said their daughter would be a heartbreaker someday. Someday. Samuel had stopped believing in someday. He'd stopped believing in a lot of things. God, Providence, the basic fairness of the universe. He'd prayed every night since Eleanor got sick. Prayed while the fever consumed her. Prayed while she slipped away. Prayed over her grave in the frozen ground. And what had prayer gotten him? 5 children with no mother. A newborn he couldn't feed. A blizzard that wouldn't end. And the slow, crushing certainty that he was going to fail them all. Samuel Harrison had survived gunfights, had fought off rustlers and outlaws, had broken horses that killed lesser men. He'd crawled 20 miles with a shattered leg once, made it back to camp through sheer, stubborn refusal to die. But none of that had prepared him for this. None of that had prepared him for the helplessness of holding his daughter while she starved, knowing there was nothing, absolutely nothing, he could do to save her. He tried the sugar water again, mixed it fresh, tested the temperature on his wrist the way Eleanor used to, dipped a clean cloth in it and pressed it gently to Grace's lips. She didn't respond. He tried again, and again. Each time, the water just ran down her chin, pooling in the folds of the blanket. "Please, baby girl." His voice was a ragged whisper. "Please, you gotta try. You gotta fight. Your ma would want you to fight." Nothing. The fire was dying. Samuel knew he should add more wood, but that would mean setting Grace down, and he couldn't. Couldn't let go of her. Couldn't stop trying, even though trying wasn't working, even though nothing was working, even though he was watching his daughter die, and there wasn't a damn thing he could do about it. This was his fault, all of it. If he'd noticed Eleanor's fever sooner, if he'd ridden for the doctor faster, if he'd been a better husband, a better provider, a better man, maybe she would have lived. Maybe Grace would be nursing happily right now, full and content. Maybe his children would be laughing instead of crying themselves to sleep. Maybe. Samuel pressed his forehead against Grace's blanket and let the tears come. He'd tried so hard to stay strong. For Tommy, for Hannah, for all of them. But here in the dark, with the wind howling and his baby fading, and his heart breaking into pieces too small to ever put back together, he couldn't pretend anymore. He was failing. He was losing. And soon he would be burying another piece of his family in that frozen ground. "I'm sorry," he whispered to Eleanor, to God, to anyone who might be listening. I'm sorry I couldn't do better. I'm sorry I couldn't save her. I'm sorry for everything." The wind answered with another shriek, and then, impossibly, beneath the roar of the blizzard, a knock. Samuel's head snapped up. 3 sharp raps against the cabin door. Deliberate, urgent. He stared at the door, certain he'd imagined it. No one could be out in this storm. The snow was chest high. The temperature was deadly. Anyone caught outside would freeze to death within hours. The knock came again, louder this time. Samuel stood, his legs unsteady, Grace still clutched against his chest. He crossed the cabin in 4 strides and yanked open the door. The wind hit him like a wall of ice. Snow swirled in, blinding, burning. And there, on his threshold, stood a figure. A woman. She was wrapped in a heavy wool cloak, so caked with snow and ice that she looked like a ghost. Her face was red from the cold, her lips nearly blue, but her eyes were the clearest green Samuel had ever seen. "I need shelter," she said. Her voice was firm despite the shivering. "Please." Samuel stepped back without thinking. "Get inside." She stumbled across the threshold. He slammed the door behind her, throwing the bolt, cutting off the howling wind. The sudden silence was almost painful. The woman stood dripping in the center of the room. Snow melted off her cloak in streams. She had a canvas traveling bag over one shoulder and a wicker basket clutched in one hand. Her skirts were soaked through. Her boots were falling apart. But she was alive. She was here. And Samuel had no idea how. "The fire," he started. "You need to—" She wasn't looking at the fire. She was looking at Grace. "The baby," she said. Her eyes went sharp, assessing. "Is she ill?" "Hungry." The word came out like broken glass. "Her mother died 3 weeks ago. I don't have—" He couldn't finish. The word stuck in his throat, trapped by shame and desperation and 19 days of failing. The woman's expression shifted. Something moved behind her eyes. Decision. Purpose. She set down her bag and basket, stripped off her wet cloak with quick, efficient movements, crossed the cabin toward him. "May I?" She held out her arms. Samuel hesitated. This woman was a stranger. He didn't know her name, where she came from, why she was out in a blizzard that should have killed her. For all he knew, she could be— Grace made a weak sound against his chest. That tiny, fading mule that meant she was slipping further away. Samuel passed his daughter over. The woman took Grace with a practiced ease that startled him. She cradled the baby in the crook of her arm, studied her face with a calm intensity, checked her breathing and color with the confidence of someone who knew exactly what she was doing. Then she looked around the cabin, took in the dying fire, the empty shelves, the general state of chaos and despair. "How long since she last ate?" "Hours, days, I don't know anymore." Samuel's voice cracked. "I tried sugar water, tried everything. Nothing works." "Sugar water won't keep her alive. She needs milk." "There isn't any. The cow's barely producing. The nearest neighbor is miles away. The town is—" "I have goat's milk." Samuel stared at her. "In the basket." She nodded toward the wicker container she'd set by the door. "I was staying at a farm 5 miles west. Their goat kidded recently. I was bringing milk to town when the storm hit." Samuel couldn't move, couldn't process what she was saying. For 19 days, he'd been praying for a miracle, for something, anything, that would help him save his daughter. And now, this woman had appeared out of a killing blizzard, carrying the one thing he needed most. "Get the basket," she said. It wasn't a request. He got the basket. She had him set it on the table, then she worked one-handed, unwrapping a cloth bundle to reveal a clean glass bottle, pouring a small amount of milk into a tin cup, testing the temperature with her finger. "It's cold. We need to warm it. Not hot, just warm. Body temperature." "The fire's almost out." "Then fix that first." Samuel built up the fire with hands that shook. He couldn't stop staring at the woman, at the way she handled Grace, at the utter certainty in every movement. She wasn't panicking, wasn't hesitating. She was doing what needed to be done, step by step, as if saving a dying baby was something she did every day. When the fire was blazing again, she warmed the milk carefully, checking and rechecking the temperature. Then she soaked a clean rag in it. "Come here," she said to Samuel. "Watch what I do." She brought the milk-soaked rag to Grace's lips and squeezed gently. A few drops fell into the baby's mouth. Nothing happened. Samuel felt his heart stop. Then Grace's mouth worked. Instinct. Survival. Her lips closed around the rag and she sucked weakly, drawing in the milk. "There you are," the woman murmured. "That's it, sweetheart. That's it." Grace's eyes opened. She looked up at the stranger holding her with that serious infant gaze. And then she drank. Really drank. Her small hands curled against the blanket. Her cheeks moved as she swallowed. Samuel felt something break open in his chest. Relief so intense it was almost painful. He sank into the chair, his legs giving out, his vision blurring with tears he couldn't stop. "She's eating," he whispered. "She's actually eating." "She's a fighter." The woman kept her focus on Grace, patient and methodical, coaxing her to take more. She just needed something to fight with. Samuel watched his daughter eat for the first time in days, watched the color slowly return to her cheeks, watched her relax into the stranger's arms with a trust she'd never shown anyone but Eleanor. "Who are you?" he asked finally. The woman glanced up. In the firelight, her green eyes seemed to glow. "Clara Whitmore," she said. "I'm the school teacher from Bentwood." "Samuel Harrison." "Well, Mr. Harrison." Clara looked back down at Grace, a small smile playing at the corner of her mouth. "It seems I knocked on the right door." The back room door creaked open. Tommy stood there, his eyes wide, staring at the strange woman holding his baby sister. Behind him, Hannah had appeared, her blonde hair tangled from sleep, and behind her, Rebecca and Benjamin, clutching each other's hands. 4 children, all watching, all waiting. "Pa?" Tommy's voice was barely a whisper. "Who is that?" Samuel looked at his children, at their thin faces and scared eyes, at the hope that was starting to flicker there, fragile and desperate. Then he looked at Clara Whitmore, this stranger who had walked out of a blizzard carrying salvation in a wicker basket. "This," he said slowly, "is the woman who's going to help us." Clara met his eyes over Grace's head, and for the first time in 19 days, Samuel Harrison felt something other than despair. He felt the smallest, most dangerous spark of hope. The night was far from over. The blizzard still raged outside. His children were still hungry, still grieving, still lost without their mother. And this woman was a stranger, someone he knew nothing about, someone who could be gone as soon as the storm cleared. But Grace was eating. His baby was alive. And right now, in this moment, that was enough. It had to be enough. Because Samuel had learned, over 19 days of hell, that you couldn't think about tomorrow when you were fighting just to survive tonight. You took what you were given. You held on to whatever hope you could find. And you kept going, one breath at a time, 1 hour at a time, until either the darkness swallowed you or the sun finally rose. Tonight, the sun had come in the form of a school teacher with green eyes and a basket of goat's milk. Tomorrow would bring its own battles. But tonight, Samuel Harrison would let himself hope. Just a little. Just enough. Grace finished feeding just as the fire finally threw enough heat to reach the corners of the cabin. Clara wiped the baby's chin with a clean cloth, then lifted her to her shoulder, patting her back with the same gentle rhythm Eleanor used to use. Samuel watched from his chair, unable to move, unable to look away. "She'll need to eat again in 2 hours," Clara said. "Small amounts, frequently. Her stomach has shrunk from going without. We push too much too fast, she'll bring it all back up." 2 hours, Samuel nodded. "I can do that." "You'll need to sleep at some point, Mr. Harrison." "I'll sleep when she's out of danger." Clara raised an eyebrow, but didn't argue. Instead, she turned her attention to the 4 children still huddled in the doorway of the back room. Her expression softened in a way that transformed her face entirely. "Hello there," she said quietly. "You must be Grace's brothers and sisters." Tommy stepped forward, positioning himself between the stranger and his siblings. That protective stance was pure instinct. Samuel had seen the same thing in the boy 100 times since Eleanor died. "Who are you?" Tommy demanded. "How'd you get here?" "My name is Clara, Miss Whitmore, if you prefer. I'm a teacher in Bentwood." She kept her voice calm, unhurried. "I got lost in the storm and saw your father's light in the window. He was kind enough to let me in." "You have milk," Hannah said from behind Tommy's shoulder. Her voice was small, wondering. "Real milk?" "I do. Goat's milk. Would you like some?" Hannah looked at Samuel, asking permission. He nodded, and she crept forward, her bare feet silent on the wooden floor. She was thin. Too thin. All his children were. 3 weeks of grief and chaos and barely enough food to go around had carved the softness from their faces. Clara poured a small amount of milk into a cup and held it out. Hannah took it with both hands, brought it to her lips, and drank like she'd never tasted anything so good in her life. "Slow down, sweetheart," Clara said gently. "There's more. You don't have to rush." Rebecca appeared next, tugging Benjamin behind her. At 5, she was the boldest of the girls, the one most likely to ask questions and demand answers. At 3, Benjamin was the quietest, hiding behind his sisters and watching the world with wary eyes. "Is the baby gonna be okay now?" Rebecca asked. "She was real quiet before. Pa said that was bad." "She's going to be fine," Clara said. "She just needed some food, same as you." "Ma used to feed her," Benjamin whispered. It was the first words Samuel had heard him speak in days. "Ma's gone now." Clara's expression flickered. Pain. Understanding. Something deeper that Samuel couldn't quite read. "I know, sweetheart. I'm so sorry about your mama." She crouched down to Benjamin's level, still holding Grace against her shoulder. "But your papa's been taking care of you, hasn't he? And your big brother Tommy. And now I'm here to help too. You're not alone." Benjamin stared at her for a long moment. Then, slowly, he reached out and touched Grace's blanket with one small finger. "She's warm now," he said. "She is. Ma was cold, at the end. Pa said it was because she went to heaven." Samuel felt his throat close up. He hadn't known Benjamin remembered that. The boy had been in the room when Eleanor passed, sitting in the corner with his thumb in his mouth, watching with eyes too young to understand what was happening. Clara didn't flinch, didn't offer false comfort or empty platitudes. "Heaven's not cold," she said simply. "Heaven's warm and bright and full of love. Your mama isn't cold anymore, Benjamin. She's watching over all of you, wrapped up in God's light." Benjamin considered this. Then he nodded, satisfied, and retreated behind Rebecca again. Tommy hadn't moved from his position by the doorway. His arms were crossed, his jaw set. He was studying Clara with the same suspicious intensity Samuel had seen him use on strangers who came to the ranch. "How do we know you're really a teacher?" Tommy asked. "Tommy," Samuel said warningly. "It's a fair question." Clara met Tommy's gaze without flinching. "You don't know me. You have every reason to be careful. Smart boy." "I ain't a boy. I'm 9. 9? Almost a man then."
Clara's mouth quirked. "And the man of the house? With your father so busy caring for your baby sister. That's a heavy responsibility."
Something shifted in Tommy's expression. The suspicion didn't disappear, but it softened slightly. Clara had seen him. Really seen him. Not as a child to be dismissed, but as someone carrying weight he shouldn't have to carry. "I do what needs doing," Tommy said quietly. "I can see that." Clara stood, adjusting Grace in her arms. "Your father's lucky to have you. All of you." "Lucky." Tommy's voice was flat. "Ma's dead and the baby almost starved, and we've been trapped in this cabin for 4 days. Don't feel lucky." "Tommy." Samuel stood, his exhaustion suddenly less important than the pain in his son's voice. "That's enough." "No, Pa, it ain't enough." Tommy's composure cracked just slightly. "Nothing's been enough since Ma died. You keep saying it'll get better, but it don't get better. It just keeps getting worse and worse, and now some stranger shows up out of nowhere, and we're supposed to just trust her?" The cabin went silent. Clara looked at Samuel. He looked at Tommy. Hannah grabbed Rebecca's hand. Benjamin pressed closer to his sisters. Samuel crossed the room and knelt in front of his son. He put his hands on Tommy's shoulders, feeling the tension coiled there, the fear and anger and grief all tangled together. "You're right," Samuel said quietly. "You're right about all of it. Nothing's been enough. Nothing's gotten better. And I've been failing you, Tommy. Failing all of you." "Pa, no, I didn't mean—" "Let me finish." Samuel took a breath. "Your mama was the one who held this family together. She knew things I don't know, could do things I can't do. And losing her, it broke something in me. Something I don't know how to fix." Tommy's eyes were bright with tears he was fighting not to shed. "But this woman," Samuel continued, nodding toward Clara, "she walked out of a blizzard that should have killed her. She had exactly what we needed to save your sister. And she didn't have to stop here. Could have kept going, tried to find somewhere else. But she saw our light, and she knocked on our door, and she helped." "What if she leaves?" Tommy's voice was barely a whisper. "What if she leaves like Ma did?" "Then we'll figure it out. Same as we've been figuring everything else out. But right now, son, she's here. And Grace is alive because of it. That's got to count for something." Tommy looked at Clara, really looked at her, past the suspicion and fear. "You gonna leave?" he asked her directly. "Soon as the storm breaks?" Clara was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I don't know yet. The storm's got to break first. Let's worry about getting through tonight before we start borrowing trouble from tomorrow." It wasn't a promise. It wasn't a commitment, but it was honest, and Tommy seemed to accept that. "All right," he said slowly. "All right." Samuel squeezed his son's shoulders, then stood. "Get your siblings back to bed. It's late, and you all need rest." "What about food? Hannah and Becca and Ben ain't had nothing since morning." Samuel looked at Clara, a question in his eyes. "I have bread," she said, "and a little bacon in my bag. It's not much, but it'll fill their bellies tonight." "We can't take your food," Samuel said automatically. "You can, and you will." Clara's voice was firm. "I ate at the Miller farm this morning. I can go without until the storm clears. Your children can't." There was no room for argument in her tone. Samuel had known her less than an hour, but he already recognized that voice. It was the voice of someone used to being obeyed. Within 20 minutes, the children were fed. Not much, just a few bites of bread and bacon each, but it was warm and real and more than they'd had all day. Benjamin fell asleep at the table, his head drooping onto Rebecca's shoulder. Tommy carried him to bed, while Hannah helped Rebecca under the blankets. When they were settled, Tommy appeared in the doorway one more time. "Miss Whitmore?" Clara looked up from where she was cleaning the dishes. "Thank you," Tommy said, "for the food, for saving Grace, for not lying about whether you're going to stay." "You're welcome, Tommy." He nodded once, then disappeared into the back room. Samuel sank into his chair by the fire. The exhaustion was hitting him now, wave after wave. He'd been running on fear and desperation for so long that his body didn't know what to do with relief. "You should sleep," Clara said. "Can't." "Can't or won't?" "Both." He rubbed his face with his hands. "Every time I close my eyes, I see her, Eleanor, lying in that bed, burning up with fever, asking me to take care of them." Clara was quiet, letting him talk. "I promised her," Samuel continued. "Last thing I ever said to her. I promised I'd keep them safe, keep them fed, keep them alive." His voice broke. "I've been failing that promise every single day since she died." "You haven't failed." "Grace almost died tonight." "Almost." Clara crossed the room and sat on the chair across from him. Grace was sleeping in her arms, peaceful and content. "But she didn't die. She's right here, warm and fed and breathing. You kept her alive long enough for help to arrive. That's not failure, Mr. Harrison. That's survival." "Barely." "Barely's enough. Barely's all any of us can manage sometimes." Clara looked at him with those clear green eyes. "I lost my father when I was 16. Watched my mother fall apart afterward. Watched my whole family collapse under the weight of grief. So I understand, Mr. Harrison. I understand what it feels like when the person holding everything together is suddenly gone." "What'd you do?" "I became the person holding everything together, whether I was ready or not." She smiled faintly. "It nearly killed me. But I survived. And so will you." Samuel stared at her. This stranger who'd appeared out of a storm, who spoke about loss and survival like she knew them intimately, who held his daughter like she'd been born to it. "Why'd you come west?" he asked. "Pretty woman with an education? You could have had an easy life back east." "Easy isn't the same as good." Clara's gaze drifted to the fire. "My mother remarried after my father died. A man I couldn't respect. He wanted me to be quiet and small and grateful. I wanted to be useful." She shrugged. "So I applied to teach out here, where women can be more than ornaments, where what you do matters more than who your family is." "Must have been hard, leaving everything behind." "Yes, but not as hard as staying would have been." She looked back at him. "Sometimes the brave thing isn't holding on, Mr. Harrison. Sometimes it's letting go and starting over." Samuel thought about that. Thought about Eleanor, about the life they'd built, about the future they'd planned that would never happen now. "I don't know how to start over," he admitted. "Neither did I. But you learn, one day at a time, one choice at a time." Clara shifted Grace slightly. "Right now, the only choice you need to make is whether to sleep in your bed or that chair, because you're swaying where you sit, and you're no use to anyone if you collapse." "I should stay up, help with Grace's next feeding." "I'll handle it. You've been up as long as I have. Longer, probably, with all that walking in the storm. I'll rest between feedings. It's only 2 hours." Clara's voice softened. "Let me help, Mr. Harrison. It's why I'm here." Samuel wanted to argue, wanted to insist he could manage, that he didn't need help, that he wasn't the kind of man who let strangers carry his burdens. But he was so tired, and she was offering, and Grace was safe in her arms. "The bed's through there," he said finally, nodding toward his room. "You take it. I'll stay out here by the fire." "Absolutely not. That's your bed. And you're the guest." "I'm the help." Clara raised an eyebrow. "You said so yourself, to your children. Now act like it. Go sleep in your own bed. I'll wake you if anything changes." She said it like it was already decided, like arguing was pointless. Samuel was too exhausted to test that theory. 2 hours, he said, standing. "You wake me in 2 hours, and I'll take over." "Fine. Promise me." "I promise." Clara smiled slightly. "Now go, before I change my mind and make you sleep on the floor." Samuel walked to his bedroom door, then stopped. Turned back. "Miss Whitmore?" "Yes?" "Thank you. For everything. For Grace. For feeding my children. For being here." He swallowed hard. "I don't know why God sent you to us tonight, but I'm grateful. More grateful than I know how to say." Clara looked at him, and something in her expression shifted, softened. "Maybe God didn't send me," she said quietly. "Maybe I just got lost in a blizzard and stumbled onto the one door where someone needed exactly what I had to give." She paused. "Or maybe that's the same thing." Samuel didn't have an answer for that. He went to bed. The sheet still smelled like Eleanor. That faint hint of lavender soap she'd loved, mixed with something else, something that was just her. Samuel buried his face in her pillow and breathed deep, letting the scent wash over him. "I found someone to help us," he told her silently. "A schoolteacher from Bentwood. She saved Grace, Ellie. She saved our daughter." The wind howled outside. The cabin creaked and settled, and through the thin walls, Samuel could hear Clara humming softly as she rocked Grace by the fire. It wasn't Eleanor's voice. Eleanor couldn't carry a tune to save her life, had always laughed about it, said God gave her many gifts, but singing wasn't one of them. But it was a woman's voice, a gentle voice, a living voice. And for the first time in 19 days, the cabin didn't feel empty. Samuel closed his eyes. He slept. When he woke, gray light was filtering through the window. Dawn, or close to it. The storm had quieted, the wind dropping from a scream to a moan. Samuel sat up, disoriented. He'd slept for hours, more than 2 hours. Clara had promised to wake him. He stumbled out of the bedroom, his heart pounding with sudden fear. But the main room was calm. The fire was blazing, freshly stoked. Grace was sleeping peacefully in her cradle, her color good, her breathing even. And Clara was at the stove, doing something that smelled impossibly good. She turned when she heard him. "You were supposed to wake me," Samuel said. "You were supposed to sleep," Clara shrugged. "You look like you needed it more than I needed help. Grace fed twice in the night, took more each time. She's doing well." Samuel crossed to the cradle, looked down at his daughter. She was pink and warm and alive, so different from the gray, still infant he'd been holding last night. "I dreamed about her," he said quietly. "Eleanor. She was standing at the end of the bed, smiling at me. Said she was glad I wasn't alone anymore." Clara was silent for a moment. Then she said, "Maybe it wasn't a dream." Samuel looked at her. "My grandmother used to say the dead visit us when we need them most," Clara continued, "that they find ways to let us know they're watching. I don't know if I believe it, but I like the idea." Eleanor would have believed it. She believed in all sorts of things I thought were foolish. Samuel's throat tightened. signs and omens and the power of prayer. Said I was too practical for my own good. Maybe she was right. Maybe. The back room door opened. Tommy appeared, followed by Hannah, Rebecca, and Benjamin in a sleepy parade. They all stopped short at the sight of Clara still there, still standing at their stove, still real. "You stayed," Hannah said, her voice full of wonder. "The storm's not over yet." Clara smiled. "And I believe I promised you breakfast." "Breakfast?" Rebecca's eyes went wide. "Real breakfast?" "Pancakes, if you'll help me make them." All four children looked at Samuel. "Well," he said, "you heard Miss Whitmore. Get over there and help." What followed was chaos. Good chaos. The kind of chaos Samuel hadn't seen in this cabin since Eleanor died. Hannah cracked eggs while Rebecca stirred batter. Benjamin sat on a stool and licked the spoon when Clara wasn't looking. Tommy set the table with a seriousness that made him look like a tiny general preparing for battle. And through it all, Clara moved among them with easy grace, answering questions, giving instructions, laughing at jokes that weren't particularly funny. She fit. That was the thought that kept circling through Samuel's mind. She fit in this space, with these children, in this life that had felt so broken and empty for so long. It terrified him, because she wasn't staying. She had a life in town, a job, a place to be. Once the storm cleared, she'd leave, and everything would go back to the way it was before. Empty. Overwhelming. Impossible. But he couldn't think about that now. Couldn't borrow trouble from tomorrow, when today was still unfolding. So he sat at the table with his children and this stranger who'd saved his daughter's life. He ate pancakes that were better than anything he'd managed in 3 weeks. He watched Hannah smile for the first time since her mother died. He listened to Rebecca chatter about her dreams. He saw Benjamin laugh, actually laugh at something Clara said, and he let himself have this moment. Just this one moment of peace. Whatever came next, whatever the future held, he would always have this morning, this breakfast, this memory of his family feeling whole again, even if it was only temporary, even if it was built on borrowed time. The storm would break eventually. Everything would change. But right now, in this cabin, in this moment, Samuel Harrison felt something he'd thought he'd lost forever. He felt like a father again. The storm held them captive for 6 more days. 6 days of snow piling higher against the cabin walls. 6 days of wind that came and went like something breathing. 6 days of Clara Whitmore becoming part of their lives in ways Samuel hadn't expected and couldn't quite explain. She had a gift with the children. That was clear from the first morning. Hannah followed her everywhere, watching how she cooked, how she folded clothes, how she held Grace with that easy confidence. Rebecca peppered her with questions about everything, about Bentwood and teaching and why she'd left the East, and whether she had a husband and why not. "I never found one worth keeping," Clara told her, and Rebecca had laughed like it was the funniest thing she'd ever heard. Benjamin was slower to warm up. He watched Clara from corners, from behind furniture, from the safety of Tommy's shadow. But on the 3rd day, she sat down on the floor next to him without saying anything. Just sat there quietly while he played with a wooden horse Samuel had carved last Christmas. After a while, Benjamin handed her the horse. "His name's Dusty," he said. "That's a good name." "Ma picked it. Your ma had good taste." Benjamin considered this. Then he said, "You can make him run if you want." Clara made the horse run across the floor, complete with galloping sounds. Benjamin smiled, really smiled, for the first time since Eleanor died. Samuel watched from across the room and felt something twist in his chest. Tommy was the hardest. He helped Clara with chores, did what she asked without complaint, but he kept a distance, a wall, like he was waiting for her to prove herself untrustworthy, waiting for the other boot to drop. On the fifth night, after the younger children were asleep, Tommy sat at the table cleaning his father's rifle the way Samuel had taught him. Clara was mending one of Rebecca's dresses. The fire crackled between them. "You don't have to do that," Tommy said without looking up. "The mending, that was Ma's job." "Someone needs to do it." "Pa can learn." "Your pa has enough to learn right now." Clara's needle moved steadily through the fabric. "And I don't mind. I like keeping busy." Tommy was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "You're not trying to be her." It wasn't a question. Clara stopped sewing. "No, I'm not." "Good." Tommy set down the rifle and looked at her directly. "Because nobody can be her. She was the best person I ever knew. And I don't want you thinking you can just come in here and take her place." "I don't think that, Tommy." "Then what do you think?" Clara considered the question carefully. "I think your family is hurting. I think your father is drowning. I think you've been trying to hold everyone together by yourself, and you're too young for that kind of weight." She paused. "I think I can help, for now, while the storm keeps me here." "And when it stops? When the storm's over?" "Then we'll figure that out." That's not an answer. It's the only honest one I have. Clara met his gaze steadily. "I can't promise you I'll stay forever, Tommy. I don't know what forever looks like for me. But I can promise you this. Whatever I do, whatever happens, I won't lie to you about it. You deserve that much." Tommy stared at her for a long moment. Something in his expression shifted. Not quite acceptance, but something close to it. "Pa likes you," he said finally. "I can tell. Your pa is grateful. That's different from liking." "No, it ain't." Tommy picked up the rifle again. "I know my pa. He don't look at people the way he looks at you. Not since Ma." Clara's hands stilled on the mending. "Tommy, I ain't saying it's bad." Tommy's voice was quiet. "Ma told me, before she died. Told me Pa was going to need someone. Said I should let him find happiness again when the time came. Said it wasn't betrayal, loving someone new. It was just living." Clara didn't respond. Samuel, listening from the bedroom doorway where he'd stopped without meaning to, felt his heart hammer against his ribs. "I think maybe you're that someone," Tommy continued. "I don't know for sure, but I think maybe. And I wanted you to know that I ain't gonna fight it, if it happens." "Tommy." "I'm going to bed." The boy stood, the rifle cleaned and reassembled. He started toward the back room, then stopped, turned back. "Miss Whitmore?" "Yes?" "Thank you, for being honest with me. Most adults don't bother." He disappeared into the darkness. Clara sat alone by the fire, the mending forgotten in her lap. Samuel stepped back into his bedroom and closed the door quietly. He lay down on the bed that still smelled faintly of Eleanor and stared at the ceiling and tried to make sense of everything he'd just heard. His wife had told Tommy to let him find happiness again. Eleanor had known. Even at the end, burning with fever, slipping away from him, she'd known what would come, what he would need, and she'd given their son permission to accept it. He should feel grateful. He did feel grateful, but he also felt guilty, because somewhere in the last 6 days, without meaning to, without wanting to, he'd started to notice Clara Whitmore as more than just help, more than just survival. He noticed the way she laughed, low and warm, the way she pushed her hair back from her face when she was concentrating, the way she looked at his children like they mattered, like they were worth caring about, like they weren't just burdens to be managed, but people to be loved. He noticed. and noticing felt like betrayal. Eleanor had been gone less than a month. Her body was barely cold in the ground. And here he was, watching another woman move through his home, fit into his family, and feeling something stir that he'd thought died with his wife. It was too soon, too fast, too much. But Clara was here, and the storm was still raging, and Samuel didn't know how to stop feeling what he was feeling. He didn't know if he wanted to. The storm broke on the 7th morning. Samuel woke to silence. Real silence. No wind howling. No snow hissing against the windows. Just the quiet of a world holding its breath. He went outside before anyone else was awake. The snow was chest-high in places, drifted against the cabin walls like frozen waves. But the sky was clear, pale blue stretching to the horizon, and the sun was rising in a blaze of gold and pink. It was over. The relief he expected didn't come. Instead, he felt a cold knot forming in his stomach. Clara could leave now. The roads would be passable in a day or two. She had a life in Bentwood, a job, responsibilities. She'd stayed because the storm forced her to. Once that excuse was gone, what reason did she have to remain? "Beautiful morning." He turned. Clara stood in the cabin doorway, wrapped in the blanket against the cold. Her breath misted in the air. Her green eyes reflected the sunrise. "Storm's over," Samuel said. "I noticed." She stepped outside, her feet crunching in the snow. "The children will be relieved. Benjamin's been asking when he can play outside. Roads should be clear enough to travel by tomorrow." The words hung between them. Clara didn't respond immediately. She walked to stand beside him, looking out at the white expanse that surrounded them. "I should go back to Bentwood," she said finally. "The school will need me. Mrs. Patterson has been covering my classes, but she's not equipped to teach mathematics. The children will be falling behind." "Of course." Samuel kept his voice even. "You've already done more than enough. We're grateful." "Don't." He looked at her. "Don't do that," Clara said. "Don't pretend like this is simple, like I'm just going to walk away and everything goes back to normal." "What else is there?" "I don't know." Her voice cracked slightly. "That's the problem. I don't know what this is, Samuel. These last 7 days, your children, Grace, you..." She shook her head. "I came here by accident, got lost in a blizzard, and stumbled onto your door. It wasn't fate or providence or any of the things people like to believe in. It was just chance." "Does that matter?" "It should. It should matter that we're strangers, that your wife just died, that I have a whole life waiting for me in town." Clara wrapped the blanket tighter around herself. "But when I think about leaving, when I think about walking out that door and never coming back, something inside me breaks." Samuel felt his heart stop. "I've been alone for a long time," Clara continued. "By choice. I wanted independence, wanted to prove I didn't need anyone, that I could build a life on my own terms. And I did. I have." She looked at him. "But these 7 days, being here with you and your children, feeling like part of a family again, I'd forgotten what that was like. I'd forgotten how much I missed it." "Clara, I'm not asking for anything." She held up a hand. "I know the timing is impossible. I know you're grieving. I know this is probably just proximity and circumstance, and two lonely people thrown together by a storm. But I need you to know, before I leave, I need you to know that it meant something to me. Being here. Being needed." She turned to go back inside. Samuel caught her arm. She stopped, looking down at his hand on her sleeve, then up at his face. "Stay," he said. The word came out before he could stop it, before he could think through all the reasons why it was wrong, why it was too soon, why he had no right to ask. What? Stay. Not forever. I can't ask for forever. But don't go back tomorrow. Don't go back until we figure out what this is. His grip on her arm tightened. The children need you. Grace needs you. I need... He stopped. The truth stuck in his throat. What do you need, Samuel? Clara's voice was barely a whisper. I need to not be alone anymore. I need someone to share the weight of all this. I need... He swallowed hard. I need time. To grieve properly. To figure out how to be a father without Eleanor. To see if what I'm feeling is real or just desperation wearing a pretty face. Clara's breath caught. I won't lie to you, Samuel continued. I don't know what this is. Don't know if it's love or gratitude or something in between. But I know I don't want you to leave. I know that when I think about tomorrow and the day after that, I want you in it. Is that enough? Is that enough to stay for? Clara looked at him for a long moment. The sunrise painted her face in shades of gold. Her green eyes were bright with something he couldn't quite read. People will talk, she said finally. An unmarried woman staying in a widower's home. My reputation will be ruined. I might lose my teaching position. To hell with your reputation. That's easy for you to say. You're a man. Then I'll marry you. The words shocked both of them. Samuel hadn't planned to say them, hadn't even known he was thinking them. But now that they were out, hanging in the cold morning air between them, he found he didn't want to take them back. You don't mean that, Clara said carefully. I think I do. Your wife has been dead for less than a month. I know. This is insane. Probably. You don't even know me, not really. I know you walked out of a blizzard to save my daughter. I know you stayed to help my family when you could have demanded we take you to safety. I know my children smile around you. I know my son told you things he's never told anyone, and you handled it with grace. Samuel released her arm, suddenly uncertain. I know I feel more like myself around you than I have since Eleanor died. Is that enough? Is that enough to build something on? Clara stared at him. Her hands were trembling. I can't have children, she said. The confession came out harsh, sudden, like something she'd been holding back for years. Samuel blinked. What? A doctor in Philadelphia told me years ago. There was an illness when I was young, and the damage. She took a shaky breath. That's why I never married. That's why I came west. Because what use is a wife who can't give her husband heirs? Clara, I should have told you before. Should have told you the moment you started looking at me like that. But I was selfish. I wanted to pretend, just for a little while, that I could have this. A family, children, a home. Tears spilled down her cheeks. But I can't give you any of that, Samuel. You already have 5 children. You don't need a barren wife. Samuel reached up and cupped her face in his rough hands, wiped her tears with his thumbs. I have 5 children, he said quietly. 5 children who need a mother. Not to replace Eleanor, never that, but to help raise them, to love them, to be there when I can't be. He held her gaze. I don't need more children, Clara. I need someone to help me raise the ones I have. You can't mean that. I've never meant anything more in my life. Clara's composure shattered. She pressed her forehead against his chest, her shoulders shaking with sobs she'd been holding back for years. Samuel wrapped his arms around her and held on. They stood there in the snow, in the golden light of a new morning, 2 broken people holding each other together. Behind them, the cabin door creaked open. Pa? Samuel turned. Tommy stood in the doorway, his siblings clustered behind him. Hannah was holding Benjamin's hand. Rebecca had Grace in her arms, wrapped in blankets. All 5 of his children, watching. Is Miss Clara leaving? Hannah asked, her voice small and afraid. Samuel looked at Clara. She looked back at him, her green eyes red-rimmed but clear. "No," Samuel said. "Miss Clara isn't leaving." "Ever?" Benjamin asked. Clara knelt down in the snow, opening her arms. "Not if you want me to stay." Benjamin broke away from Hannah and ran to her. Rebecca followed, then Hannah. They crashed into Clara like a wave, nearly knocking her over, wrapping their arms around her and holding on. Tommy stayed where he was. Samuel walked over to his son and put a hand on his shoulder. "You okay with this?" Samuel asked quietly. Tommy watched Clara, laughing and crying, as his siblings buried her in hugs. Then he looked up at his father. "Ma would be happy," he said. "That's enough for me." He walked over to Clara and the others, stood there for a moment, awkward and uncertain. Then Clara reached out and pulled him into the pile. Samuel Harrison stood in the snow, watching his family, all 6 of them now, tangled together in the morning light. He thought about Eleanor, about her smile and her laugh, and the way she'd told Tommy to let him find happiness again. "I hope you're watching," he told her silently. "I hope you can see this. I hope you understand." The wind whispered through the cottonwood branches, and Samuel chose to believe that was her answer. The news reached Bentwood before they did. Samuel rode into town 3 days after the storm broke, Clara beside him on the wagon seat, all 5 children bundled in the back. He needed supplies. Clara needed to collect her belongings from the boarding house, and both of them knew they couldn't hide forever. The whispers started before they'd even reached the general store. Mrs. Prudence Blackwell stood on the church steps, her gray hair pinned beneath a severe black bonnet, her thin lips pressed together in a line of pure disapproval. She watched them pass with eyes that could cut glass. "Don't look at her," Clara murmured. "Hard not to. She's the minister's wife. She thinks she speaks for God." "Does she?" "She speaks for herself. God's too busy for that kind of pettiness." Samuel felt his mouth twitch despite himself. "You sure about that?" "I teach Sunday school, Mr. Harrison. I know exactly how petty God isn't." They pulled up in front of Mercer's General Store. Samuel helped Clara down from the wagon, his hands lingering on her waist a moment longer than strictly necessary. He heard a gasp from somewhere behind him, and didn't care. "I'll get the supplies," he said. "You go to the boarding house. I'll meet you there." "Samuel," Clara's voice was low, "you don't have to fight my battles." "Ain't fighting anything. Just getting flour and coffee." "You know what I mean." He did know. Could see it in the way people were staring, gathering in small clusters, their voices dropping to urgent whispers. The whole town was watching. The whole town was judging. "Let them talk," he said. "Words never killed anyone." "Words kill reputations. Reputations kill futures." "Then we'll build a future that doesn't need their approval." Clara searched his face for something. Whatever she found there seemed to satisfy her. She nodded once, then turned and walked toward the boarding house, her back straight, her head high. Samuel watched her go. Then he lifted Grace from the wagon, settled her in the crook of his arm, and walked into the general store. Ezra Mercer was behind the counter, his round face carefully neutral. He'd known Samuel for years, had extended credit more than once during hard times, had attended Eleanor's funeral and said all the right things. Now he looked at Samuel like he was seeing a stranger. "Mr. Harrison." "Ezra, I need flour, coffee, sugar, and whatever vegetables you've got that survived the storm." "Of course." Ezra didn't move. "I heard Miss Whitmore's been staying at your place." "She has." "For how long?" Long enough to save my daughter's life." Samuel kept his voice even. "The blizzard trapped her there. She had goat's milk when Grace was starving. Without her, I'd be digging another grave right now." Ezra's expression flickered.
"I see. Do you? I'm not judging, Samuel. You know me better than that. Then why does it feel like the whole town's decided to judge before asking a single question?" Ezra glanced toward the window, where a cluster of women had gathered on the boardwalk. Mrs. Blackwell was among them, her voice carrying through the glass. "Prudence Blackwell's been talking since yesterday," Ezra said quietly. "Said Miss Whitmore compromised herself. Said no decent woman would stay alone with a man for that long, storm or no storm. Said the school board should dismiss her immediately." "That's horseshit." "I know it. You know it. But Prudence has a way of making people believe what she wants them to believe." Samuel felt anger rising in his chest, hot and sharp. "Miss Whitmore saved my daughter, took care of my children while I was barely able to stand. She did nothing wrong." "I believe you. Then tell them that." "It's not that simple." Ezra leaned across the counter, his voice dropping. "Prudence's husband is the minister. What she says carries weight. And she's decided that Miss Whitmore is a fallen woman who seduced a grieving widower." "That's a lie." "Truth doesn't always matter in a small town. Perception does." Ezra straightened up. "I'll get your supplies. Just be careful, Samuel. For your children's sake, if not your own." Samuel paid for the supplies and loaded them into the wagon. Tommy helped, his face tight with awareness of the stares following them. "Pa, why's everyone looking at us like that?" "Because they don't understand." "Understand what?" "That Miss Clara's a good woman who helped us when we needed it most." Tommy was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Ma always said small minds make small worlds." "Your ma was a wise woman." "Is Miss Clara going to be okay?" Samuel looked toward the boarding house where Clara had disappeared. "I'm going to make sure of it." He found her in the small room she'd rented, packing her belongings into a worn carpet bag. Her movements were quick, efficient, but he could see the tremor in her hands. "What happened?" Clara didn't turn around. "Mrs. Patterson came to see me. She's on the school board." "And?" "And they voted to suspend me pending an investigation into my moral character." Clara's voice was flat. "Apparently living in a widower's home for 7 days is enough to warrant concern about what I'm teaching the children." Samuel felt the anger surge again. "That's not fair." "Fair has nothing to do with it." Clara finally turned to face him. Her eyes were dry, but he could see the hurt beneath the surface. "I knew this would happen. I warned you it would happen." "Then why'd you stay?" "Because I couldn't leave." Her composure cracked slightly. "Because your children needed me. Because Grace needed me. Because you needed me, and I couldn't walk away from that." "I still need you." "Samuel, no, listen to me." He crossed the room, took her hands in his. "I don't care what they say. I don't care what they think. You're coming back to the ranch with me. Today. Right now." "That'll only make things worse." "Things can't get worse. They've already decided you're guilty. Might as well give them something to be right about." Clara stared at him. "You don't mean that." "I mean every word. You want respectability? Fine. I'll give you respectability." Samuel took a breath. "Marry me." "You already asked me that." "I'm asking again, properly this time. In front of witnesses, if that's what it takes." "Samuel, you don't have to." "I want to." He squeezed her hands. "I want you, Clara. Not just as help, not just as a nursemaid for my children. As my wife, as my partner, as the woman I wake up next to every morning for the rest of my life." "It's been less than a month since Eleanor died."
I know how long it's been.
I count the days every morning when I wake up. His voice roughened. But Eleanor told Tommy to let me find happiness again. She gave me permission before she even left. And I really think, she'd want this. She'd want someone like you. Clara's eyes filled with tears. You don't know me. Not really. Then let me learn. Give me the chance to learn. And if you regret it, if you wake up one day and realize you made a mistake, then we'll figure it out together. That's what marriage is, isn't it? Figuring things out together? Clara laughed despite herself, a watery sound that was half sob. You make it sound so simple. Maybe it is simple. Maybe we're the ones making it complicated. Before she could respond, a commotion erupted outside. Voices raised in argument. Someone called Samuel's name. He went to the window and looked down at the street below. Mrs. Blackwell stood in the middle of the road, a crowd gathering around her. She was pointing at the boarding house, her voice carrying clear and sharp. There, that's where the harlot hides. That woman who corrupted a grieving man, who wormed her way into his home, who exposed innocent children to her sinful presence. Samuel felt something cold settle in his chest. Stay here, he told Clara. Samuel, don't! But he was already gone, taking the stairs two at a time, pushing through the boarding house door and out into the street. The crowd parted as he approached. Mrs. Blackwell fell silent, her eyes widening slightly as she took in his expression. Mr. Harrison, she recovered quickly, her voice dripping with false sympathy. I understand you've been through a terrible ordeal. The loss of your wife, the storm, the vulnerability of being alone with young children. It's natural that you might be confused, that you might mistake gratitude for something more inappropriate. Stop talking. The words cut through her speech like a blade. Mrs. Blackwell's mouth snapped shut. You don't know anything about what happened in my home, Samuel said. His voice was quiet, but it carried across the silent crowd. You weren't there when my daughter was dying. You weren't there when I held her and prayed for God to send help. You weren't there when Miss Whitmore walked out of that blizzard with exactly what we needed to survive. Mr. Harrison, I'm simply trying to protect the moral fabric of our community. You're trying to destroy a good woman because she did something kind. Samuel stepped closer. Mrs. Blackwell stepped back. Miss Whitmore saved my daughter's life. She cared for my children when I could barely function. She did nothing wrong, nothing immoral, nothing shameful. An unmarried woman living alone with a man for 7 days was trapped by a storm that would have killed anyone who tried to travel through it. Would you rather she'd frozen to death in the snow? Mrs. Blackwell's face reddened. That's not yes or no. Would you rather she died? Silence. That's what I thought. Samuel turned to face the crowd. He recognized most of them. Neighbors, acquaintances, people who'd come to Eleanor's funeral and told him how sorry they were. Miss Whitmore is a good woman. She's a good teacher. And she's going to be my wife. Gasps rippled through the crowd. You can't be serious, Mrs. Blackwell sputtered. Your wife isn't even cold in her grave. My wife is dead. Samuel's voice cracked on the word. I buried her 4 weeks ago. I've spent every day since trying to keep our children alive and failing at it. And then Miss Whitmore came, and for the first time since Eleanor died, I could breathe again. He looked around at the watching faces, some hostile, some sympathetic. Most just curious, hungry for drama in a town where nothing exciting ever happened. I'm not asking for your approval, Samuel continued. I'm not asking for your permission. I'm telling you how things are going to be. Miss Whitmore is coming home with me. We're going to get married as soon as it can be properly arranged. And anyone who has a problem with that can take it up with me directly. This is outrageous, Mrs. Blackwell's composure finally shattered. Reverend Blackwell, say something.
The crowd shifted, and the thin, gray-haired man stepped forward. Reverend Thomas Blackwell looked tired, his eyes carrying the weight of a man who'd spent decades listening to other people's problems. "Samuel," he said quietly, "is this truly what you want?" "It is." "And Miss Whitmore, does she consent to this?" "You should ask her yourself." Clara appeared in the boarding house doorway. She'd gathered her composure, her back straight, her chin lifted. She walked down the steps and crossed the street to stand beside Samuel. "Miss Whitmore," Reverend Blackwell addressed her directly, "do you wish to marry this man?" "I do, despite the circumstances? Despite the talk that will follow you?" "Words are just words, Reverend. What matters is what we do with our lives, not what other people say about them." Reverend Blackwell studied her for a long moment. Then he turned to his wife. "Prudence?" "Thomas, you can't possibly be considering—" "I'm considering what God would want me to consider. A man who lost his wife, children who lost their mother, a woman who helped them when no one else could." He shook his head slowly. "I see no sin here, only grace." "Grace?" Mrs. Blackwell's voice rose. "She compromised herself. She showed compassion." Reverend Blackwell's voice hardened. "Something this town could use more of." The crowd murmured. Mrs. Blackwell looked around, seeking support, finding none. "I'll perform the ceremony myself," Reverend Blackwell said, "whenever you're ready." "Tomorrow," Samuel said. "The sooner, the better." "Tomorrow, then." The Reverend nodded once. "God bless you both." He took his wife's arm and led her away. She went, but not before shooting Clara a look of pure venom. The crowd began to disperse. Some people offered quiet congratulations. Others just walked away, their opinions clear in their silence. Mrs. Dorothy Brennan approached, her weathered face creased with a genuine smile. "I always knew you had good sense, Samuel Harrison. Your mama would be proud." "Thank you, Dorothy." "And you, Miss Whitmore." Dorothy took Clara's hands. "Don't let the small minds get you down. Most of us know exactly what kind of woman you are." "Thank you," Clara whispered. When they were finally alone, standing in the middle of the street with the wagon and children waiting, Clara let out a breath she seemed to have been holding for hours. "Did that just happen?" "It did." "We're getting married tomorrow." "We are." Clara looked at him, her green eyes wide. "You're insane." "Probably." Samuel reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "But I'm insane about you. That counts for something." She laughed, and the sound broke something loose in his chest, something that had been frozen since Eleanor died. "Your children are watching," Clara said. Samuel glanced at the wagon. All 5 of them were hanging over the side, their faces a mix of confusion and hope. "Let them watch." He took Clara's hand. "They might as well get used to it." They walked back to the wagon together. Hannah immediately demanded to know what was happening. Rebecca wanted to know why that mean lady was yelling. Benjamin asked if they could go home now. Tommy just nodded at Clara, a small smile playing at the corner of his mouth. And Grace, sleeping peacefully in her basket, didn't stir at all. Samuel helped Clara onto the wagon seat, then climbed up beside her. He took the reins and clicked his tongue at the horses. As they rolled out of Bentwood, he felt Clara's hand slip into his. "Scared?" he asked. "Terrified." "Me too." "Then why are we doing this?" Samuel thought about Eleanor, about the promises he'd made her, about the life they'd built and the life he was building now. "Because being scared together is better than being alone," he said. "And because I think this is exactly where we're supposed to be." Clara squeezed his hand. Behind them, Bentwood grew smaller in the distance. Ahead of them, the road stretched toward home. The wedding was simple. Reverend Blackwell performed the ceremony in the small church, just as he'd promised. The pews were mostly empty. Dorothy Brennan sat in the front row with her two oldest daughters. Ezra Mercer came, standing awkwardly near the back, like he wasn't sure he belonged. A few other neighbors trickled in, the ones who decided that kindness mattered more than gossip. Mrs. Blackwell was conspicuously absent.
Clara wore a pale blue dress she'd made herself during the long nights at Samuel's cabin. The fabric had come from a bolt Eleanor had purchased before she died, still wrapped in paper, waiting for a project that would never come. Clara had found it in a trunk and asked Samuel's permission before cutting into it. Eleanor would want it used, he'd said. She hated waste. So Clara had sewn her wedding dress from a dead woman's fabric, and somehow that felt right. Like Eleanor was part of this. Like she was giving her blessing in the only way she still could. Tommy stood beside his father as witness. At 9 years old, he was too young for the role, but Samuel had insisted. "You're the man of this family too," Samuel told him. "You earned that. You should be part of this." Tommy had straightened his shoulders and nodded, trying to look older than his years. Hannah held Grace throughout the ceremony, her thin arms careful and steady. Rebecca kept Benjamin quiet by letting him play with a wooden horse she'd smuggled into the church. They were all there, all watching, all part of what was happening. When Reverend Blackwell asked if Samuel would take Clara as his wife, Samuel's voice was clear and strong. "I will." When he asked Clara the same question, she looked at Samuel, then at the children, then back at the man who was about to become her husband. "I will." The ring Samuel slipped onto her finger had belonged to his grandmother. Simple gold, worn smooth by years of wear. It fit Clara perfectly, as if it had been waiting for her all along. "You may kiss your bride," Reverend Blackwell said. Samuel cupped Clara's face in his rough hands and kissed her gently. Behind them, Hannah giggled. Rebecca made a disgusted sound. Benjamin asked loudly why grown-ups did that with their mouths. And Tommy, standing at his father's shoulder, smiled. After the ceremony, Dorothy Brennan hosted a small gathering at her farm. Nothing fancy. Just food and conversation, and the quiet celebration of two people finding each other in the aftermath of tragedy. "You've got yourself a good one," Dorothy told Clara, while the children played in the yard. "Samuel Harrison's one of the finest men in this valley. Loyal to a fault. Works harder than any three others combined." "I know," Clara said. "And those children adore you already. I can see it." "I adore them back." Dorothy studied her with knowing eyes. "You're going to be all right, you know. Despite what Prudence Blackwell thinks. Despite what anyone thinks. You found your place." Clara watched Samuel across the yard, watched him lift Benjamin onto his shoulders, while Grace slept in the crook of his arm. Hannah was showing Rebecca how to do a cartwheel. Tommy stood nearby, pretending he was too old for such things, but watching with a smile he couldn't quite hide. "Yes," Clara said quietly. "I think I have." They went home that evening as a family. The cabin felt different now. Not empty, not haunted, just full of possibilities waiting to be discovered. Clara had moved her belongings into Samuel's bedroom, arranged her books on the shelf next to his, hung her few dresses in the space beside Eleanor's. She'd worried about that last part, about whether it was wrong to take a dead woman's place so literally. But Samuel had been the one to suggest it. "Eleanor's things should stay," he said. "This was her home. Her children need to see her presence here, need to know she's not forgotten. But there's room for you too. There's always been room." So Clara's life merged with Eleanor's, not replacing, but joining. Two women's belongings side by side, two stories becoming one. The first weeks were an adjustment. Clara learned the rhythms of ranch life,
The early mornings and endless chores. The way weather dictated everything. She learned which of Samuel's silences meant he was thinking, and which meant he was struggling. She learned how to read his moods, when to push, and when to give him space. Samuel learned, too. Learned that Clara needed time alone with her books, that she got irritable when she hadn't read something in days. Learned that she hummed when she was happy, and went silent when she was worried. Learned that she had nightmares sometimes, dreams about her father's death that left her shaking in the darkness. On those nights, he held her without asking questions. And she held him on the nights when grief hit him like a wave, sudden and overwhelming, pulling him under. They learned each other, slowly, carefully, with all the patience that two wounded people could muster. The children adjusted in their own ways. Hannah became Clara's shadow, following her everywhere, helping with everything. She wanted to learn to cook, to sew, to do all the things her mother had done. Clara taught her gladly, recognizing the need beneath the request. "You're not trying to become your mama," Clara told her one afternoon. "You're becoming yourself. And yourself can know all the things your mama knew without being her." Hannah had cried at that, and Clara had held her, and something between them had shifted into place. Rebecca was easier. She accepted Clara with the uncomplicated trust of a 5-year-old, adapting to the new reality without overthinking it. Clara was here. Clara was nice. Clara made good pancakes. That was enough. Benjamin took longer. He still watched Clara from corners sometimes, still compared her to Eleanor in ways he didn't have words for. But slowly, gradually, he began to seek her out, began to ask her to read him stories, began to call her mama without seeming to realize he was doing it. The first time it happened, Clara's heart nearly stopped. She looked at Samuel, uncertain. "Let him," Samuel said quietly. "If that's what he needs, let him." So Clara became mama to a 3-year-old who'd lost one mother and found another. And she loved him for it, loved him with a fierceness that surprised her. Loved all of them with an intensity she hadn't known she was capable of. Tommy was the last to fully accept her, not because he was hostile, not because he fought against the change, but because he remembered Eleanor most clearly, carried her loss most consciously, and needed more time to make peace with what had taken her place. It happened on a spring evening, 3 months after the wedding. Clara was sitting on the porch, watching the sunset paint the valley in shades of gold and purple. The younger children were inside, getting ready for bed. Samuel was in the barn, finishing the evening chores. Tommy appeared and sat down beside her without speaking. They stayed that way for a while, comfortable in the silence. "Ma used to watch the sunset," Tommy said finally. "Every evening if she could. Said it was God's way of reminding us that endings could be beautiful." "She sounds wise." She was. Tommy picked at a splinter in the porch railing. "I miss her." "I know you do." "Does that bother you, that I miss her?" Clara turned to look at him. "Why would it bother me?" "Because you're here now. Because you're our ma now, sort of. Because maybe you want us to forget her so we can love you instead." "Tommy," Clara's voice was gentle but firm, "I will never, ever want you to forget your mother. She gave you life. She loved you for 9 years. She shaped who you are. That doesn't go away because I'm here." "But love doesn't work like that," Clara continued. "It's not a pie that gets smaller when you cut more slices. It's a fire that grows bigger when you add more fuel. You can love your mother and love me too. You can miss her and accept me at the same time. Those things aren't opposites." Tommy was quiet for a long moment. "Pa loves you," he said. "I hope so. Not like he loved Ma. Different." "Yes, different. Is that okay?" Clara reached over and put her hand on his. "That's exactly how it should be." Your father loved your mother with everything he had. He built a life with her, had 5 children with her, buried her when she died. That love will always be part of him. And you? Me, he's learning to love. Day by day, choice by choice. It's a different kind of love, built on different ground. But that doesn't make it less real. She squeezed his hand. And I'm learning to love him too. Learning to love all of you. Tommy turned his hand over and squeezed back. I'm glad you came, he said quietly. That night, in the blizzard, I'm glad you knocked on our door. So am I. Ma would have liked you. Clara felt tears prick her eyes. That might be the kindest thing anyone's ever said to me. Tommy smiled, really smiled, and for a moment he looked like the 9-year-old boy he was supposed to be, instead of the little old man grief had made him. Can I tell you something? He asked. Anything. I prayed that night, when Grace was dying and Pa was crying and everything felt like it was ending. I prayed for God to send help. And then you knocked on the door. Clara's breath caught. I think maybe you were the answer, Tommy said. I think maybe God sent you to us. Tommy, I know you don't like to think about it that way. I know you said it was just chance, getting lost in the storm. But I don't believe that. I think you were supposed to find us. I think Ma sent you. Clara couldn't speak. The tears were falling now, silent and warm. Tommy stood up, suddenly awkward, like he'd said too much. I'm going to go help Pa in the barn. He was halfway across the yard when Clara found her voice. Tommy? He turned. Thank you. For telling me that. For letting me be part of your family. Tommy nodded once. Then he ran toward the barn, his long legs eating up the distance. And Clara sat on the porch and cried until she couldn't cry anymore. Summer came and went. Clara returned to teaching 3 days a week, with accommodations made for her responsibilities at home. Mrs. Patterson had advocated for her reinstatement once the initial scandal died down. Most of the school board had come around, recognizing that whatever had happened during the blizzard, Clara Whitmore Harrison was still the best teacher their children had ever had. Mrs. Blackwell remained hostile, but her influence had waned. People had seen her cruelty, had watched her try to destroy a good woman for the crime of showing kindness. They remembered. Small towns always remembered. Grace grew strong and healthy, her personality emerging more each day. She had Eleanor's delicate features, but Samuel's stubbornness, a combination that promised trouble in the years to come. She called Clara Mama, the only mother she would ever know, and Clara loved her with the same fierce intensity she loved all the others. Samuel started building the new house on the hilltop. It would take years to complete, he warned Clara. They didn't have the money to hire help, so he'd do it himself, board by board, nail by nail, whenever he could spare time from the ranch work. I don't care how long it takes, Clara told him. We have time. They did have time, all the time in the world. On a cool autumn morning, nearly a year after the blizzard that had brought them together, Clara woke feeling strange. Not sick exactly, just different. Like something had shifted inside her that she couldn't quite identify. She didn't mention it to Samuel, didn't want to worry him over nothing. But the feeling persisted. Days turned into weeks, and slowly, Clara began to recognize what was happening. She went to Dr. Whitfield in town, the same doctor who'd pronounced her barren all those years ago in Philadelphia. He examined her carefully, his expression growing more puzzled by the moment. Mrs. Harrison, he said finally, I don't know how to explain this, but you're pregnant. Clara stared at him. That's not possible. And yet here we are. Dr. Whitfield shook his head in wonder. Medicine doesn't know everything, Mrs. Harrison. The body has mysteries we haven't begun to understand. Whatever damage you suffered in your youth, it seems to have healed. You're carrying a child. Clara walked home in a daze. She found Samuel in the barn, brushing down one of the horses. He looked up when she appeared, immediately concerned by her expression. "What's wrong? What did the doctor say?" "Nothing's wrong." Clara's voice was barely a whisper. "Samuel, I'm pregnant." He went completely still. "The doctor in Philadelphia said I couldn't. Said the damage was too severe. But Dr. Whitfield says it's true." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "I'm going to have a baby. Our baby." Samuel crossed the barn in 3 strides and pulled her into his arms. He held her so tight she could barely breathe, his whole body shaking with emotion he couldn't contain. "Are you sure?" "The doctor's sure." "Clara." He pulled back to look at her face, his own eyes bright with tears. "Clara, I know." "After everything? After what you were told?" "I know." He kissed her, deep and desperate and full of joy. They told the children that evening at dinner. Hannah burst into tears of happiness. Rebecca demanded to know if it would be a boy or a girl. Benjamin asked if the baby could sleep in his room. Tommy sat quietly, watching his father and stepmother, with an expression that Clara couldn't quite read. Later, after the younger ones were in bed, Tommy found her in the kitchen. "You're really having a baby?" "I am." "But you said you couldn't. That doctor back east said—" "Doctors don't know everything," Clara smiled. "Apparently, miracles still happen." Tommy was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Ma would be happy for you." Clara felt her heart swell. "You think so?" "I know so. She always said every child was a blessing, and she'd want Pa to have more blessings, especially after everything. This baby won't change how I feel about you and your siblings. You know that, right? You'll always be my children, too." "I know," Tommy smiled. "But it's still nice, knowing there'll be someone who's part of both of you. Someone who proves that this family is real, not just something we put together because we had to." Clara pulled him into a hug. He was almost as tall as her now, growing so fast. In a few years, he'd be a man. "This family was always real," she said. "From the moment I walked through that door in the blizzard. We chose each other." "That's more real than blood." The baby came in early spring, almost exactly 2 years after Clara had first knocked on Samuel's door. A boy, healthy and screaming, with his father's dark hair and his mother's green eyes. They named him Elijah. Eleanor's choice, if she'd had a boy. Samuel had found the name written in the margin of her Bible, circled and underlined. "She picked it before Grace was born," Samuel said, holding his newborn son. "Said if we ever had a boy, that's what she wanted. Then that's what he'll be." Clara reached out and touched Elijah's cheek. "Eleanor's choice. Our son." Samuel looked at her with so much love, it nearly broke her heart. "She sent you to us," he said quietly. "I really believe that now. She knew what we needed before we did, and she sent you." Clara didn't argue. She'd stopped fighting that idea months ago. Maybe it was chance. Maybe it was fate. Maybe it was Eleanor, watching from heaven, guiding a lost schoolteacher through a blizzard to the door that needed her most. It didn't matter which was true. What mattered was this family, this home, this life they'd built from grief and hope and the stubborn refusal to give up on each other. Years later, when the new house on the hilltop was finally finished and filled with the noise of children and grandchildren, Clara would tell the story of how it all began. The blizzard, the dying baby, the knock on the door. She'd tell how a widower with 5 children had taken in a stranger, How that stranger had saved his daughter's life. How they'd fallen in love, despite everything working against them, despite grief and gossip and the cruelty of small minds. She'd tell how they'd chosen each other, day after day, year after year, through hardship and joy, through loss and celebration, through all the ordinary moments that made up an extraordinary life. And at the end, she'd always say the same thing. Love isn't about finding someone perfect. It's about finding someone worth fighting for. Someone who makes you want to be better than you are. Someone who holds your hand in the darkness and doesn't let go. Samuel would nod beside her, his hair gray now, his face lined with age, but still handsome to her eyes. And sometimes, he'd add, love knocks on your door when you least expect it. All you have to do is be brave enough to answer. The cabin still stood on the property, preserved as a reminder of where they'd started. Every winter, when the first heavy snow fell, the Harrison family stocked it with supplies and left a light burning in the window. Just in case someone else was lost in a storm. Just in case someone else needed saving. Because Samuel and Clara Harrison understood something that most people never learned. Kindness given freely always found its way back. And love, when it was honest and brave and willing to weather any storm, could transform even the darkest winter into the brightest spring. That was their legacy. Not wealth or status or the approval of those who had judged them, but a light in the window, a door always open, a family built on choice rather than obligation, and the unshakable knowledge that they had found each other exactly when they needed to, exactly where they were supposed to be. That was enough. That was everything.